If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 322 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, joined today by the Oberyn Martel of Irish MMA media, Graeme McDonald, as we talk about a fairly action-packed weekend in the world of mixed martial arts, from Bellator and Irish MMA and UFC and everything like that, and a big weekend upcoming as well. So we're going to break down all of that. It's also the second of the month here as I record it, so if you're not signed up to Patreon yet, now is a great time. We'll have lots of stuff coming up. Myself and Ian have a Chasing Pack episode coming out tomorrow. I have the rewatch Poirier versus Duffy already in the books. We'll have loads of more stuff. So patreon.com/Severe MMA podcast. It's a great time to sign up. You get the whole month for the price of a pint. So it's perfect. And also, attention listeners, because everyone across the galaxy from Australia to Houston, do you have a pube problem? If so, your friends at Manscaped have cleared you for takeoff with their 4th generation brand new lawnmower 4.0. Kick your pubes to the next planet with the Performance Package 4.0. The orbit in your pants will feel like you're in zero gravity when you use the best tools for the job from the leaders in male grooming. Join the 2 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped, and get your rocket ready for takeoff by going to manscaped.com for 20% off and free shipping with the code Severe MMA. I was just away for the weekend there, so I had my Manscaped out before I got away, so it was absolutely ideal. And you can get ready too for an out of this world experience. You just look no further than that Performance Package 4.0. It's brand new. It's just taken off, not only from the USA and Canada, but also in the UK, Ireland, Europe, Australia, South Africa and Singapore. Inside this package you'll find their Lawnmower 4.0, the Weird Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, which I use all the time, is absolutely fantastic, as well as the Crop Reviver toner, the boxer briefs, the travel bag, the whole lot of it. Absolutely fantastic. I had mine out this morning. So first scheduled for liftoff, new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. This spaceship is here to guide you on a journey to trim your balls, body, butt, and even Uranus. Oh, well, there you go. The 4th generation trimmer also features the cutting edge ceramic blade. Everyone knows about that. It reduces the incidence because it's skin safe technology. 7,000 RPM motor, on and off switch for the light, and now you have the travel lock as well, and it's waterproof. The 4.0 is the 4,000K LED spotlight, which I mentioned, and you can turn that on and off. It also includes the Weed Whacker if you're a little astronaut needs to chop the worst weeds on your nose and ears. The Weed Whacker is also waterproof and uses the 9,000 RPM motored 360 degree dual blade system. The nose and ear hair trimmer provides this word I can never say it, proprietary skin safe technology. I'm going to get that right one week. Which helps prevent nicks, snags and tugs in those delicate holes. Don't forget to use the Crop Preserver ball deodorant, the Crop Reviver also, for your little planets on their to keep them on their A game while feeling the sun's heat. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts, the boxers and the Shed travel bag. Abort hairy balls and Buzz Lightyear that Woody with Manscaped. So get 20% off with the code Severe at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping as well. Don't forget that. With the code Severe at manscaped.com for a clean trinity and beyond. Your space balls will thank you. Right, Graeme, a big weekend in the world of mixed martial arts. It feels, I was on the beer for the first time in what feels like about 10 years. So it also feels like about a week since these fights happened. But still in all, it was a pretty mad weekend of fights. And we will run through some of the fights and some of the big ones in a while. But I want to start this off by talking about Bellator. And I tweeted after the fight at the weekend, and I saw a few people kind of saying the same thing after I was saying it, that it was a bit of a coming of age for Bellator. And I suppose that's an easy thing to say, though, you know, the phrase coming of age. But I think it was like a literal coming of age for Bellator, because I remember talking, I think it was 3 years ago at this stage, when I was putting the awards together for Severe MMA, and I was looking at the breakthrough prospects, and I remember, maybe it was 2 years ago actually, but I think probably both actually, 2 and 3 years ago, and I remember looking at them and thinking, everyone here is either a UFC star, say someone like maybe an Adesanya would have been in it at that time, like a UFC standout almost fighting for a title, or in Bellator. And like, I think out of maybe 10, 7 were in Bellator or something like that. Bellator have done a fantastic job of paying young talent early to get them to come to the promotion, and it's starting to pay off. Like, AJ McKee is one of these guys where we talk him a lot of the time, and a lot of people for a long time have said the best talent in the world is all in the UFC. They will find their way, they will make their way to the UFC. That is no longer true, and especially with someone like AJ McKee. This guy, if you're someone who just watches the UFC or maybe tunes in for a bit of Cage Warriors and doesn't really have an interest in Bellator, this guy is like the next level of fighting. This guy is the next John Jones, the next McGregor, the next Habib, the next GSP. He is a fantastic fighter. I remember tweeting about it like 2 years ago, thinking, and someone tweeted at me during the weekend, kind of in a joking way, like Rory McDonald walked so AJ McKee could run. We talk about the next level of MMA fighters who started off as MMA fighters. His father, is still fighting, only fought not too long ago. Antonio McKee was a very good fighter, but AJ McKee, he is just the next level. It reminds me a little bit of, Floyd Mayweather with the father and his uncle and everything. Now, I'm putting a lot on him there with Floyd Mayweather, John Jones, and Habib and everyone. But, a bad next turn, or if he gets too cocky, or if he gets something, and it could all go awry in one fight. That's the way MMA is. But at the moment, with his skill set and his ability, it looks like what Bellator have done is really paying off. And I suppose before we get into the fight itself and everything like that, what do you think of that, Graeme? I know we've spoken about a lot, and it's almost easier for us to see it even, because apart from, let's put it this way, all of the SBG up-and-coming Irish fighters, which is the biggest gym in Ireland, have been signed for Bellator over the last while. So we've seen it very much firsthand, but they're doing it in America and they're doing it elsewhere as well, and it's starting to pay off for them, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. I think, that they've taken the right route. They haven't. We've seen in the past people like Trump come in with trying to pay through the roof to try and get these guys out of the UFC, even if they're a bit, over the hill, or, trying to get, the likes of Arlovsky and Tim Sylvia on these huge deals. And then it's not sustainable. But Bellator is, Bellator are in it for the long haul. They've shown that, like I don't know how many years I've been watching Bellator, but watching Bellator a lot of years, ever since it began, and they've never made like a move to sign somebody where you're like, oh, I don't know if that makes sense. That's too big of a risk. Where you see other promotions do that all the time and try to challenge the UFC and blow themselves out early. And Bellator, obviously, they built up guys like, even like Pitbull, the guy who's ended up losing here, is obviously, one of their biggest, most successful fighters that they've ever had in their promotion. Has been there with his brother a long time, grown up in Bellator to some extent. Obviously he was signed from elsewhere, but now, as you said, it's kind of like the AJ McKee wave coming in now, and we'll obviously talk about the performance now. But I think as good as particular Pitbull is, I think the next generation, like the AJ McKee, who's like, he's up there leading. I can't think of a better prospect really, in any weight division than AJ McKee, and when somebody who I'd like to see against, I'd like to see him against so many different fighters. And this fight against Pitbull, I was really looking forward to it. It seemed like it had real jeopardy. It seemed like it had like real potential to be like a watershed moment, as you kind of touched on. Yeah. And it was that. AJ McKee came out, looked so smooth and comfortable in such a big spot for him. Obviously he's 17-0 going into that, and he's fought a lot of fights, but he's been in a couple of big moments, like the main event in Dublin. What was it, the main event, or
it was one of those weird
main event was halfway through the card or whatever.
Yeah, it was what kind of was, yeah.
Yeah, and he overcame a bit of adversity, a bit of a big crowd against him as well, and that probably stood him well and stood to him well in this fight as well. But this was a very big moment, and if you had have looked at who was the kind of young up and coming guy, you wouldn't if you didn't know who either guy was, you wouldn't have known. Like, he didn't look out of place at all in terms of nerves or anything, and then in terms of obviously the fight, he looked phenomenal. He beat Pitbull everywhere. So obviously, just we can talk about the very end of the fight, the technical submission in a minute. But either way,
before we get into that, I'm just looking at the awards here from 2019 or the nominations, and we have Fabian Edwards, right, who is, okay, he's had a couple of losses, but he's fought in probably a couple of contender fights now at this stage, and he's right up there. Adam Barrocks as well, okay, he's had one loss, but he's a very, very good fighter. James Gallagher looks like he's headlining again. How many times has he headlined? AJ McKee is here. Patchy Mix, he's had a loss as well, but he's bounced back from it, and he's going to be fighting James Gallagher in the main event. Norbert Navinny, to me, another one of the best in the world. So there's a lot, and that's from 3 years ago, and that's the work that is kind of paying off, I think, for Bellator, where we see a lot with the UFC as well. And the thing about Bellator is as well, we've criticised Bellator a lot down through the years for the different ways they do things, but I feel like for these young prospects, they're matching them well, and they're giving them experience, and they're bringing them to where they need to be. Whereas, say, the likes of the UFC, when they sign, someone like a Mason Jones or a Jai Herbert or someone like that, they're just kind of throwing them to the wolves, and it's a very hard way of doing it. Whereas Bellator, I suppose, maybe because some of the lower level talent in Bellator is a lot lower than the lower level talent in the UFC, if you get me. So maybe it's easier to do it there. But I feel like sometimes with Bellator, like the perfect thing to do if you're a fighter almost is go to Bellator, sign for 6 fights, and then go to the UFC. Maybe that's the way to do it. But it's still the money they're paying and everything like that. But that money is paying off in terms of the amount of talent they have. Now, is it paying off in the amount of money they're drawing from that talent? We'll wait and see. But if you want that level of talent and that very good talent, that is a good way to do it. Like, as you said, the Trump and stuff, and even a bit of Bellator, they were trying to do that even at the start of the Cork era, signing Benson Henderson and Matt Mitrione and other people like that.
Yeah, it's pretty good for them that it didn't really work out. You know what I mean? It didn't.
Blessing in disguise.
Yeah, exactly. They didn't get one guy in, and they're all of a sudden doing these huge numbers, and they're like, oh, let's get a bunch of these kind of washed up veterans in. And the way TV's going, the way sport on TV is basically becoming live sport is the only thing that people really go out of their way to, or in their masses to watch live or to watch TV for, is live sport. So Bellator obviously are pretty established now. They have a big roster. They have some very exciting fighters. They have a consistent spot on TV. People, maybe even if they're not into MMA, they probably know the name Bellator at this stage because it's been around so long. And going forward, it could keep going the way it is. It looks like it will keep going the way it is, where live sports become even more valuable. And maybe they can once there's.
Yeah, and even if I follow a lot of obviously the wrestling and listen to Dave Meltzer's podcast and things, and the keep an eye on the ratings a lot for maybe WWE and AEW more than this. But if you look at the example of, say, an AEW, which is the second, I know a lot of people have no interest in wrestling, but I'm talking about TV ratings here more than anything else, and that's where they get a lot of their money. Their ratings have absolutely taken off, and they've done it with mostly in the top spots their own new talent, and okay, they have some older WWE talent and stuff like that, but they kind of prove that. I know it's a very different thing, but it's a different thing, but it's looking at people's wants and needs and why they will tune in for something. And if Bellator can produce fighters that people want to see and care about, they'll produce high ratings and they'll produce more money. So if this, for maybe the first time ever, this Bellator event, and maybe because I switched over, I was inside bed, I was watching this Hall versus Strickland card, and there was no one at it, and it was really kind of silent. And someone actually tweeted at me, it was a perfect night with Sean Strickland in the main event. And Sean Strickland's a good fighter, don't get me wrong, but not a big name, and he won and beat someone who is kind of a name. And then you go over to Bellator, and there's 15,000 people in the stands, and you have the big walkouts, and you have them, when when a fight is big, when they're being followed from the bowels of the arena, you know, and they're coming out and you could see everything behind the scenes and, you know, all of that. And you could see AJ McKee being handed the money, and it just felt, it had that big fight feel, you know, the old school boxing fights or the big UFC fights and big McGregor fight or something like that. It had that feel. No, it wasn't as big as all of them, but it did. They did a great job of that, I felt like. And I felt like as well, they really took advantage, maybe not even knowingly, but they had the advantage over the UFC in a huge way on Saturday night. And, you know, myself and Ian, actually the Chasing Pack hasn't come out yet, but it's out during the week, but we were kind of half discussing that. And I think myself and you, or maybe even the Q&A was discussing last week, that putting it on a Saturday night mightn't have been the best idea with the UFC, and just with a bit of a clash. But it turns out it didn't clash, and it looked like a bigger deal, which is very, very much a win-win for Bellator. So before we start talking about the fight, I think it was a great night and a great weekend all in all for Bellator. So on the fight itself, look, it didn't last long. What am I looking at it here? It actually doesn't say it on Topology, but what did it last? Like a minute or something like that? Pitbull came out, landed that, McKee came out, landed that big head kick. Like all week,
I think it was 157.
Was it that much? Jeez. So all week I was kind of thinking McKee, because I really do believe in his skill set. But then I was just like thinking about Pitbull and the way he comes out and he just kind of walks people down and he lands those big shots. I'm like, it really only takes one of those, you know. And he's really good at fighting people who are longer and bigger than him. But McKee didn't really give him the chance. I thought, was it Morrow kind of said it at the very start of the commentary that he was taking the center and he was kind of bossing that area. And when he did that and he was able to kind of land from far out, it wasn't I was saying, it's curtains for Pitbull earlier or anything, but it was a bad sign, I think. And that head kick was unbelievable. Big John kept saying, he made a mistake, but watching it back, it was like, you know, sometimes fighters are better off taking that half a second, sussing out what's actually happened and then attacking rather than just jumping in. He could have got caught, you know, in his full guard or something like that. It actually would have been worse. So I'm not sure if it was that much.
I don't think he was sussing it. I think he
did try to celebrate.
Okay, yeah. But I think he started to celebrate, and then Pitbull kind of tried to stand up and basically into a choke.
Yeah, and he did choke. What did you think of the finish? Like, to me, it was just, he got him in a choke, he choked him, his hand went limp, and the ref stopped it, and it was nothing wrong. What did you think?
Oh, like his hand looked like it went limp for a second, but it wasn't like definitive. You know, I would ideally would have given it a couple more seconds, but I think, you know, it looked like it probably his hand went limp, but you know, another second or two and we would have been sure.
To me, look, it was one of those ones where, right, he was badly hurt, and from a referee's point of view, you have to look at it in.
If it's damaged like punches and stuff, or like a choke, or a blood choke is. No, I think you can leave it a couple more seconds. And
fair enough. But like if you're already hurt and you're stuck in that submission, and your arm goes limp, you're not giving the ref much of a choice. And also, I hate doing this, but when you look at Pitbull's face right after the referee stopped him, he had no complaints. Like, he had none. He complained like 45 seconds later with his brother and stuff at the end of the cage, with them Pitbulls having all affinity with doing. But he wasn't complaining directly afterwards. Like, I think he knew, and I didn't see much wrong with it. The arm definitely went limp. I know people say, if you say his arm went limp and it started moving 2 seconds later, then you agree that it should have been stopped, you know? If you say it didn't go limp at all, fair enough, maybe that's your argument. I would disagree with that, but if that's your argument, fair enough. But if you think it did go limp, then that fight there's no problem stopping that fight at that stage. You can't criticize the ref. But there was another angle from the other side, and it looked like his other arm went limp as well. So I really think it's a good stoppage, to be honest. I couldn't criticize it all. And I know you said give it an extra few seconds, but like, he's already hurt. How much time do you want to give him? I think he was in that choke for a good bit, and you know, like, when a choke is going like that and the fighter's arms go like that, you know what's happened. Like, what are you waiting for at that stage? Like, there's a very, very small window between good stoppage and bad stoppage, and bad stoppage either way, and I feel like he got it just right in the middle. What would you have liked to see? Do you think he just deserved another few seconds, or what was your take on him?
Well, I think it wasn't definitive that he was definitely gone limp. I think 50% out, but he probably still had a few senses there, like, you know what I mean? And it's possible he could have survived it, but very unlikely. So I don't think there'd be too many complaints. Like, obviously the people, but they're going to complain. It actually makes sense to complain because you actually improve your chances of a rematch.
Yeah.
If you an immediate rematch, if you complain. But for AJ McKee, obviously it's a brilliant performance. He win a lot of money and a title and kind of fulfill what he always wanted. So obviously it's a big moment, and he thought he when you land a clean shot, he maybe, like a lot of guys would have been finished by that. But AJ's got to in the future make 100% sure that the fight's over before he celebrates, even if he got away with it this time. But it's a good way to have that lesson learned in winning like $1 million and a title.
Yeah, indeed. I think if we're talking about rematch, Pitbull is the champion at the weight up. AJ's a big guy for the 145-pound title. Maybe AJ will go for the 155-pound title next, go up and challenge him there. I think that'll probably be the smart move to make. Although I don't like kind of guys moving up and down as much, especially when you just won the title. But when it's a champ and you just beat him, I think it's a smart move. Would you like to see him fight again at 155?
Yeah, I think I would. Like, usually I probably wouldn't, but I think in this case, I think Pitbull's obviously been at the top of the Bellator for a long time, and McKee's coming up and kind of taking the crown. So it does kind of make sense to give the long-standing champion a rematch. But it was a very one-sided bout. Pitbull didn't really get anything off. He didn't really get a chance. AJ just ran over him. So you might want to kind of establish AJ McKee as a champion there, but I think Pitbull's one of their biggest, if not their biggest, names that they could put AJ against, and he'll probably do the biggest numbers. And I think that's probably the logical thing to do next. But I think I kind of agree with you, especially when he's a young guy just become champion. You don't want him jumping weights all over the place. But there's only the strength of depth on the roster isn't what it is in the UFC, so there isn't that many options that come to mind.
Yeah, when I look at it, I think it's a little bit like Cyborg versus Nunes. It's like, okay, it was a kind of a one-round trashing in a way, but I also really wanted to see that rematch just because it was like the two biggest female stars in the UFC and probably the two biggest male stars, in Bellator. Cyborg is probably maybe above even both of them, funnily enough, as we mentioned it, or maybe in between, depending on where AJ goes from this. But yeah, it feels like it was one of those ones, like I'll mention wrestling again, but where the star puts the young up and comer over, and he is the star now. But if they did it a second time, it might even be more of that. And if Pitbull was to go in and win, you have the trilogy. So it's a pretty fight as well, as you love to say recently, Graeme. So it's I think they need to make the rematch, and we'll see where we go from there. But without a shadow of a doubt, it's a big one for Bellator. So the rest of the card then after that, Mads Bernal against Emmanuel Sanchez in a very, very close fight. I tweeted at the weekend, it was one of those where all 3 rounds you could nearly argue for either lads, and all 3 rounds are like oddly close in a weird way. Like, there was a couple of rounds where Mads Bernal had a lot of time on top, but also landed some shots, but Sanchez landed some as well. And that first round was a weird round, because I was listening, who was I listening to? I think Dave Meltzer talking about it, and he was like, Sanchez definitely won it. And I'm like, well, did he? Like, a lot of those shots, like, I was looking at the stats at the end of the round, and they're like, Sanchez had landed 47 of 130 thrown or something. I was like, there is no way he landed that many shots. A lot of those shots were missing, and I actually think Bernal's shots were harder than his. Now, I still scored it for Sanchez, because he landed some hard shots as well.
The first two for Sanchez, I thought. The first was definitely for Sanchez. The second was the kind of disputed round, and then the third was Bernal. So it's a close round, I don't, I think 29-28 either way. I think maybe because the 30-27s from the two judges maybe made people a bit more a bit more passionate about the
I can
the
see
results.
a 30-27 there, though, honestly. Like, a 30-27 is one of those cards that fucking judges hate, because it could be 30-27 the other way in there. Like, well, maybe not, but it could be 29-28 the other way. And it's like,
I think the first was Sanchez down now.
I gave it to him, but I thought it was extremely close. Like, if you go back and watch that again and go through with a fine-tooth comb, punch for punch, and I didn't, but I watched it very closely at the time, because I kind of had an idea of the way it started, that it could be one of those very close rounds, very close fights even. It turned out to be that. So I was watching it very closely, and I just think Sanchez, he didn't land enough to make it 100% 10-9, you know? I thought he landed enough to win it, and I gave it to him on my card, but my card isn't sitting there cage side either, and that's what the judges are doing. They're sitting there with a fine tooth comb watching, and we won't get into another judging podcast again because we could be going all week, but it was a really close one. I look, if you're asking me my opinion, I think Sanchez won it, but Bernal winning is probably better for the promotion. It's probably better for everyone. That's a shitty thing to say for Sanchez, because he's a very good fighter, but a bit of new life again. You know, Bernal, we've talked about him for a long time because of, you know, the connection in Cage Warriors and obviously getting out of the UFC, and Paul Hughes, Ireland's own Paul Hughes, was on about fighting him for a while, and that didn't materialise and everything like that. So it's Bernal's a very good fighter, and you know, if him versus AJ McKee is a fight I would love to see, especially if it went to the ground. Imagine that in the ground, it'd be unbelievable. But yeah, we will see what happens with that. But what a fight, though. Forget about the judging for a second. That first round, especially, that was one of the rounds of the year. It was switching over from the UFC to that, it was just unbelievable. It was fantastic. So yeah, it was very good. I didn't catch all of Bellator because, as I was saying, I was watching the UFC and I was gone early on Sunday. Did you catch the Nurmagomedov and the other
Brent
lads?
Primus against
He lost.
yeah, I thought it was a really close first round, but I thought he edged that. I thought he won the second, and I thought he lost the third, but it was one of them where it could have went either way, and you know, you're not surprised when it's a split decision. I think it was a split decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was one of them that could have went either way. But I thought he was going to get the nod, but yeah, he left. It was too close for comfort.
Ilare Joanna lost to Vanessa Porto there as well. Magomed Sharapov's brother Kasan, he won here in his Bellator debut, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe he's had one more, but he looks a good up and comer as well. And then obviously we had the two Irish lads starting off the card on a mixed night for SBG. Kiefer Crosby lost to Georgie Karakhanyan in a very, very tough matchup, and I think both of us were talking about it before. We were a little bit maybe surprised this fight was put together. And then Brian Moore beat Jordan Winsky. Let's talk about Kiefer first, and then we'll get to Brian Moore. I thought it was a good start from Kiefer, similar to his last fight. You know, a good start and it turned very quickly. You know, he pushed him against the cage. I thought he was stronger than Georgie, which I was very surprised at. But you know, how surprised can you be, I suppose, with someone coming down from 170 for fighting someone coming up from 145? But still in all, I didn't think there was a great size difference, but there was definitely a strength advantage for Kiefer there, and he was landing some good shots. Had the back at one stage, you know, was doing some good work, but then I thought he made a fatal error when he was kind of slipping off the back, and he pulled Georgie's arm out, and you can't mess with someone like Georgie Karakhanyan like that on the ground. If Kiefer had probably had the time again, he probably would have either let himself slip off the back, come out and got into a clinch, or if he was fast enough, and it would have been very hard, but maybe got back to the feet from that position, even pull on that fence and like just get away from Karakhanyan and kind of start out in the middle again. But he decided to, you know, and SPG have talked a lot about that recently, you know, with the McGregor camp and everything, about being more MMA fighters and, you know, getting into, you know, not shying away from different parts of the sport. And Kiefer did that, but it turned out badly for him, because when he pulled out that arm to take it away, to take that you know, that base away from Karakhanyan, Kiefer ended up being the one who slipped off on the left hand side, and Karakhanyan ended up on top. And from that position, you know, I thought Kiefer actually did a great job of kind of, what do they call it, mission control, the high foot guard, you could call it, right over the head, and he was landing some nice shots.
Some nice shots, yeah.
Very dangerous in that position. But once Karakhanyan got into that arm triangle position and was able to get across Kiefer, you know, that was night from that position, and he's a demon on the ground, as we've seen, you know, fighting Redzer and fighting other people as well. A very, very good fighter. But I thought it was the one error from Kiefer. You know, I see a lot of people talking about making that one error, and that's the difference in high level MMA when you're fighting someone with 42 fights like Georgie Karakhanyan, and you've 10 fights before that's that difference of an experience, that difference of maybe 4 or 5 additional years in the cage can tell a lot, and that was the difference for me. What did you think of the fight and overall and Kiefer's performance?
Yeah, I thought, as you said, I thought he made a good start. I thought he looked good. He looked like the aggressor, and I think it all did come down to that momentary decision, to, as you said, and obviously he slipped off and ended up on the bottom, and he did defend well. He hung in there and he tried to kind of tough it out, but I think it was just locked in, and maybe he could have scooted over towards the cage a little bit. I'm not really sure. I've never been in that position. It's obviously very uncomfortable and very difficult, and the guy's heavy on top of you. So obviously, as you said, he's a very experienced guy, and when he did get his opportunity on a mistake, he capitalized. And Karakhanyan, 42 fights is a lot of experience, a lot of time in the cage, and he's obviously, as you said, a very good submission guy, a very good grappler, and maybe that's been kind of key for his weakness over the years, especially back in his amateur career. He's looked a lot better recently, but maybe it is better to stay away from where a guy is better. I know you want to be a well-rounded MMA fighter, as you say, kind of go everywhere, but sometimes you're playing into a guy's strength unnecessarily, and it would have been interesting to see how the fight went if that didn't happen, but I suppose we'll never know now.
It's one of those things where it's kind of it's a catch-22 situation, because the only way you'll get better into those positions is by being in those positions. But I suppose maybe you want to do that in training rather than a fight. But learning those lessons, making those mistakes, as Kiefer said, he hasn't taken. Look, he was in a couple of tough fights against Josh Plant, and his last fight out against Charlie Leary as well. But he hasn't taken a load of damage over the years. He's still young enough to the sport as well. And those are things you need to go through. It's not all plain sailing. It's not all fucking 15-0 and getting to the very top, quite easily. So, if you look at someone, say, like a Quealy, I remember we talked about it before, and even when I interviewed him and asked him about it, he was like, started off as a striker, then he was very much, when he was fighting out in the UFC Africa, tried out a lot of grappling in a lot of different positions, and look what happened in his last fight. He got on the bottom and he fucking elbowed a fella to oblivion and ended up ending the fight from there. And maybe those, not necessarily mistakes, but those things will stand to you in the future. I'm sure
hard-learned lessons.
Hard-learned lessons, indeed. And MMA is a sport where hard lessons are learned, and sometimes we see guys coming up and they're like, oh, even someone like an Ian Gary or a Paul Hughes or like that, lads, you haven't learned many lessons yet. And I know Paul Hughes has had the broken hands and he lost the fight as well. And even the same for, say, James Gallagher. He ended up getting a hard lesson losing as well. MMA, you can't avoid it, and do you know what? Sometimes you're maybe better off getting it at times. But Kiefer seems to be, a hard-nosed guy who will never give up. And as we talked about, and we'll talk about in the future as well, in the UFC fight, that's a good thing to have. So he seems to be going out to train now a bit with James Krause, and that's 100% a great thing, I think, for the likes of him and James Gallagher. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for Kiefer. And then on Brian Moore, what a performance! Brian Moore is the guy who's learned those hard ways as well, isn't he? He's had now 21 fights, lost a third of those, but he is, he's taken those hard knocks. He's had those hard decisions, those hard losses, had those hard injuries, and, been there. And now he looks like this is the apex of Brian Moore's career. I think this is the time where he needs to get those big fights, and he's calling for those big fights. He needs to be ranked. I don't think Bellator understand how good a fighter Brian Moore is. Now, I'm not saying he got in and he'll, win the title or anything like that next week, but he would not shame himself, I think, if he fought a top 10 guy, and I think he'd beat a couple of the top 10 guys, and I don't think he'd shame himself against a few of the top 5 guys either in that division.
We saw him in there against AJ McKee, and, he was doing very well in that fight until, AJ managed to turn it around in the third round and get a rear naked choke. And we've seen how, that's the most adversity we've probably ever seen AJ McKee in since. So, I think that will tell you, he's definitely ready for the top of the division. I think, obviously the guy he's coming in against here, Jordan Winsky, is 11-2. He's a pretty experienced guy as well. Getting there, he's not inexperienced anyway. And Brian Moore just picked him apart. I think loads of leg kicks, better boxing, better all around, and just kind of had his way with Winsky and just just looked comfortable in there. And I think, you know, Brian Moore over the years, maybe his nerves and his being too hard on himself and, you know, not really enjoying it, maybe, you know, not allowing himself to enjoy it was kind of his problem. But now he seems to kind of really got into his own skin. And as you said, it's kind of like the apex of his career now. He's the best he's ever been, and he's you know, he's only on a 3-fight win streak here, but you know, the loss before that was Noad Lahat, and before that was AJ McKee. So if you look at his record, you might think you know, he's just another guy, but if you look at his performances recently, and even in the AJ McKee fight and the Noad Lahat fight that he lost, you know, he's game, and he'll always bring it, and he's a dangerous opponent for anybody in that division.
Yeah, and he seems to, like, you know, you talked about it there, he's kind of changed, even maybe personalities a little bit in a very, very good way. But every time you speak to Brian Moore, every time he does an interview or he has a fight, he always mentions, you know, his girls at home, his daughters and his wife, and, you know, built a new house over the last couple of years and has his gym at home and now was able to train at home. And he always speaks about, you know, I even talked to him during the week, and we were kind of discussing it, the way he has found a way to train solo, and that the coronavirus really, you know, didn't change much for him in terms of his preparation.
Yeah,
where a
he's
lot
been
of
doing
people,
it for years.
yeah,
Like, he's literally been doing it for years, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to, you know, he has a family, he has a gym he's running, he can't be driving hours up and down to SVG every day. So it's been a necessity that he's had to form a kind of program for himself, and it looked like, you know, it seems to be working extremely well. Like the results have probably been even better since he kind of went off by himself and just kind of in the gym sometimes and on his own most of the time.
And as well, like, even I asked him about this during the week, because like a lot of those lads, like, he was training, you could probably tell anyone more than this, but he was training back in the days, you know, in that small yellow gym with the other SVG lads and everything, but he hasn't.
Yeah, the Long Mile Road gym. Yeah.
He hasn't had that. He has had some of the hard sparring and everything like that, but he doesn't have as much of the collisions as the other guys, because he's training a lot of times by himself. And whereas they might have it, you know, 5 to 6 days of the week, he might have it 2 to 3 days of the week. And that fine balance, I think he found, it wouldn't work for everyone, I don't think, but it's definitely working for him. And this performance here was brilliant. In that first round, you know, he said afterwards he broke his foot in the first round, which makes it even better. But it was one of those, the first one was one of those ones where Moore landed 4 or 5 big rights, and so did Winsky. But I think everything else Moore did outside of that was enough to take the round. You know, I'm not going to effective aggressiveness here, but I think he landed the more impactful shots when you think like it was kind of even with all the biggest impactful shots in the round, and you have to give it to Moore for that. But I think he adjusted unbelievably well. You know, he spoke afterwards and he said he wasn't maybe happy with the adjustments he made, but I thought he did. He was kind of getting that head out of the way more and wasn't there for the right hand. And to me, he took maybe 1 right hand or 2 maybe late in the fight. But other than that, for 10 minutes, he basically didn't take a punch. You know, he was just dominating the fight, hurt him with calf kicks, almost finished Winsky at the start of the second, landed on top and got a load of elbows. And in the third, fair play to Winsky. I thought he was game, you know, coming in short notice, threw a lot of shots, but just was landing not in. Brian Moore was just too good defensively, and offensively, he was just kind of picking him off. But, you know, he said afterwards, obviously, about the foot, and his movement was obviously a little bit distracted by that, but he just kind of came through it anyway. And look, hopefully it isn't too serious. I haven't heard anything about it yet, but hopefully he'll be back by November, and hopefully Ireland will be able to host it in November. But just a terrific performance. And, you know, Brian Moore's one of the good guys as well. Irish MMA a lot of time gets an awful bad rap with, you know, different fighters and different attitudes of fighters. But Brian Moore he's a good family man. He's a really nice guy and everything like that. And you know, the people of Wexford get behind their fighters and get behind their sportsmen and GA teams and everything like that, and always have. And I think if Brian Moore was in a big fight, you know, you could see a lot of people travelling over to it, or travelling up even from Wexford to the Tree Arena to watch it, and I think he deserves it. I think he has. There maybe, you know, we saw Peter Queally getting a big fight in Bellator, obviously against Patricky, and we've seen the likes of Norman Park get big fights in the UFC and KSW, and you know, Redzer and Neil Seary getting his go in the UFC. I think a lot of people have got what they deserve over the last few years with the hard work they've put in Irish MMA, but Brian Moore, I still think there's more to come from him, and there's more that he's worked and not just deserves, he's earned it, I think. And I you know, okay, I'm going to be a little bit biased here, but I think he should get it, and I would love to see him getting it. So yeah, fair play to Brian in a fantastic performance, and I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to be next from him and from that bantamweight division, because it's a very good division as well. Let's move over to the UFC card. I haven't seen all of it, as I said, but it wasn't the best card in the world. There was 3 fantastic knockouts in the middle of it, though. Cheyenne Boys, Jared Gooden, and my boy Baggy Melsic Bagasarian, who looks like a next Team Sheehan member, to be honest. He was that good, coming out throwing flying kicks and everything like that. The head kick by Cheyenne Boys and the punches, and then she talked about afterwards getting a 50k bonus and it was going to turn her life around and everything like that. And someone sent me the Kiefer Crosby's pay, and he got 50 grand, I think, for his fight. So we talk about Bellator and why Bellator are getting some of the better up and coming fighters, and that's why, right away there. But fair play to her. That Jason Witt, Brian Barberena fight, very, very close. Grutzmacher as well in a close fight. There was a draw in the Kai Kamaka fight. Jinyu Frey, another decision, and another decision for Adeshayev as well. And Phil Rowe was able to beat Orion Koski. But the main event, Sean Strickland versus Uriah Hall. I really fancied Uriah Hall coming into this. I was kind of shocked that he was the underdog.
Should listen to me.
Yeah, I should have listened to you. I don't know. I think I see this fight differently to a lot of people, even the reaction online after it happened and things. I really thought like Uriah Hall was kind of trying to weather the storm of Strickland a little bit, and was he actually did a terrible job of, I think, being defensively good, but I think he was trying to be defensively good for the first 2 to 3 rounds. But by the time the third round came, I think he just taken too many shots and Strickland wasn't going anywhere. And I think he realised that, oh fuck, this game plan has not worked and now I'm screwed. It was one of those. And that wasn't based on Uriah Hall making a mistake in a game plan. That was based on Sean Strickland being very, very good. Just basics, throwing that jab, coming forward. And he looks so awkward, and he just doesn't look like a great fighter. But
that's the thing. He's
tough.
So awkward that he seems to make the opponent just look worse than they'd usually look. He just has one of those styles that seems to be hard to overcome. And as you said, by the time you kind of realize that this isn't going well, it's too late. He's already settled into his strange rhythm. And Uriah Hall, I just can't trust him in a big fight against an awkward guy or a good guy. Like Sean Strickland is not just awkward; he's very good, and he's something you kind of have to figure out. It seems, he's beaten some good guys. He's never really had that kind of signature win up until now. Like his biggest win is probably, Tom Breese. That doesn't look like that big of a win now, but that's the decision win over him back at UFC 199 was a big win. And, that's not exactly, a huge win. And Uriah Hall's been in there with some guys with better wins than that. But I think Sean Strickland, people are going to have to start taking him seriously. He just he's a tough matchup for anybody, I think. I know his style is kind of boring, and a lot of his fights look like kind of sparring matches, but he looks to be very hard to deal with. I don't know who you're gonna put him in there with next. He's not exactly exciting. He's not really, as you said earlier in the podcast, he's not really a known name, even though he's been in the UFC for a long time and he has a very good record. If you look at his record, 24-3, that's an extremely good record. So he's lost to Usman, by decision. That's everybody's lost to Usman by decision. You know what I mean? And there's only other loss then that I haven't mentioned is Ponzinibbio and Zaleski. So I thought he'd beat Uriah Hall here, and he did probably a little bit more comfortably than I thought he would. So, he may not be the most exciting guy, and he's never probably going to be the most exciting guy, and fans are never really going to get behind him, and that may stop him getting the fights that he deserves. But I think he does deserve a step up into the kind of, maybe just below the upper echelons. And I'm not saying stick him in there for a title shot yet, but he's just come off a big win in a main event against a guy who was actually known because of his ridiculous knockout on the Ultimate Fighter and stuff like that, and. A guy who's outside of that tough knockout has had some extremely good knockouts as well. So I think this is a very big win. It may not be a marquee name, but I think this is probably the biggest win of his career. And I think you could put him in there against maybe a Paulo Costa, somebody like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing that fight at all. I'm one of those people that kind of, I say, maybe have underestimated him as well, but the thing about that middleweight division, I think it's so bad that someone like Sean Strickland in a lightweight division I think would just get torn apart, and would get shown up. But that's a bit unfair to say as well, because as you say, his style is awkward, and sometimes you could meet 5 or 6 lads in a row who have trouble with that awkward style. But I just feel like against someone like a Whitaker or someone like an Adesanya, just terrible matchups, I think, for Sean Strickland. Now, he's wrestling and stuff as well, so maybe not against Adesanya as we've seen recently. But, yeah, he go on.
If you look at people like, Gastelum, Darren Till, Hermanson, Brunson, Vittori, you can see him beating all those guys. Cannonier.
I wouldn't mind seeing him fighting Till. I think that'd be an interesting fight.
Yeah, I can see him winning all those fights. And the Paulo Costa fight, I can see him winning as well. I know Adesanya and Whitaker are another story, but if he gets a couple of wins out of those names I mentioned there, who's to say he couldn't go in there and make it very awkward for either Whitaker or Sanya, whoever's the champion at the time. He may not be glamorous and flashy and have all these highlights, but you don't necessarily need that. If you can, look at Jan Blachowicz, he's gonna quietly got under the radar, beat guys, maybe not in the upper echelon, and develop the skills. And he's an awkward guy to fight, and look where he is now.
Yeah, and I actually think, I agree. I think that Whitaker fight would actually be a fun fight. Now, I'd pick Whitaker to win it, but I think him versus Whitaker is a barn burner written all over it. But yeah, a great win here, and in a solid performance. Uriah Hall, I think, a bad performance, made look bad by someone, but do you know what? It was one of those ones I think Uriah Hall will probably take more from than his wins in terms of fans' respect for him, because he never stopped. He was fucked in that round 5, and he was just throwing and throwing and throwing and throwing. And I think I've always had maybe a little bit more respect for Uriah Hall than most people. I've always kind of liked him and liked his style and things, or maybe not always, but recently anyway. But I think other people will kind of respect what he tried to do in that fight late. Now, they mightn't respect his game plan and what he produced in the cage, but he never gave up, and that's a big thing in MMA.
And he had a couple of opportunities to give up, where maybe he would have in the past. And
100%.
There was one stage where I thought maybe he's starting to break here, but in fairness to him, he hung in there and gave it everything.
Yeah, 100%. So over the last week, there was some. We'll get to UFC 265 in a second, but there was some Irish fighters fighting over the last week, and some very good results for them as well. Last week we had, just kind of after the podcast, Danny Nealon had a great performance, and Ryan Spillane unfortunately lost, going in there against an Olympic wrestler. Myself and Ian will talk more about that in the chasing pack, and Irish MMA in general. But it's a very tough time recently for Irish MMA fighters getting fights, and just being able to get out there. But it's good to see Danny Nealon out, and Palahan as well had 2 fights on Sunday night, I believe it was, for Combatches Global, and my Skybox decided not to record it, but I have it here. My boy Sean Dinney, he gave me a report. So Pa came in, and he got taken down a couple of times, but he was the only one landing any shots, and he got up every time. Almost caught in a Darce choke at one stage, or caught in a Darce choke but not in danger. He stayed calm and got out. He was better on the feet, almost got a rear naked choke and won that one by decision. It was a 1-round fight, but it's down as a professional fight because it was a tournament. And in the second fight, his opponent came out and tried a few takedowns. Pa stayed calm and got back up, and he did a lot of damage from a triangle position with elbows. His opponent had a bit of trouble, and Pa finished it with ground and pound, while his opponent was turtled up. So 2 nights, 2 wins for Palahan. He, if anyone saw him at that Cage Warriors event last year and saw the video that was kind of going viral that Padraig Foran, the legend, took, how good Palahan is. So a really, really good performance from him. And him and Danny Nyland, and Ryan Spillane as well, even though unfortunately with a loss of 3 very good people coming through. and I have a lot of time for all of them, and you know, like following along with their journeys, and you know, we've talked to all of them, I suppose, in Severe MMA again, but I'm just definitely get Danny back on soon, as well as the rest of them. Ryan spoke to Ian last week, and we've had Pan on too long ago as well, so it's great to see kind of the next batch of Irish MMA fighters coming through who maybe have, you know, 2 to 3 to 4 fights now as well. So you know, Danny started off, I think she made her debut in Bellator as well, so that's in front of the Tree Arena, and that's a big place to start off, so it doesn't get much bigger than that. So it is it's all good after that, I think, with pressure wise and stuff. So good to see him back, and obviously Artem Lobov as well retired so during the week.
Looking forward to his next one.
Yeah, look, it's very hard for me to come on. I'd love to come on and do like a half an hour podcast on Artem, and you know, maybe we will at some stage and put it up on Patreon if any of our $20 subscribers want that. But it's very hard to believe retirements from anyone, and you know, just because we know Artem and he's Irish and stuff, we can't say any different here, because we say the same about everyone else, and we will say that. I think Artem still has a lot to give, to be honest, and I think there's still some good fights out there. Even like Bellator and Artem seems like a match made in heaven, to be honest. Like there's you know, there's a lot of guys that I think he could fight around the scene at 145 and 155. I could even see him fighting someone like a Patricky, you know, someone like that, and I know it'd be a very tough fight for him, but yeah, I think imagine him versus, you know, Emmanuel Sanchez or anyone like that. Tough fights, but Artem is always game and he comes out to fight, and I think Bellator could do worse than signing him. Didn't he fight Saul Rogers before? Maybe that'd be a rematch we could see or something like that. But if this is it for Artem, and it, you know, probably isn't, let's be honest. But if this is, and I don't want me to sound bad, but it's the same. We say the same for everyone, so we want to be consistent here. What a career he's had in terms of like. I suppose a journeyman may be a little bit unfair to anyone, and people hate to be called that, but he wasn't a guy with the best record, maybe not a guy that people expected to get into such big fights, but he did. He got to the UFC, and he did very well in the Ultimate Fighter, obviously after a shaky start, but got, 3 knockouts, got a fucking main event against Cub Swanson, beat fucking Paulie Malignaggi in a fist-throwing matchup. What a career for Artem. Brilliant, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, he's a guy who was, even when he was starting off his career, was taking fights against experienced guys with good records. He didn't care what weight it was. We talked about in the past, like fighting at welterweight on days' notice and things like that. And even in fights he lost, he was always, you know, in the fight, always causing problems, landing those big punches from the hips that he was famous for. And you know, I think the start of his pro career, he was kind of just, you know, winging it, and he wasn't really dedicated to MMA. But once he kind of focused on MMA and started training full time, you know, I think in that, you know, that Cub Swanson fight that you mentioned there, he kind of even though he lost that fight, he showed himself to be like, you know, not a joke. Like some people were kind of laughing at him. Oh, look at his record. He's only there because he's McGregor's mate or whatever. But I think he kind of proved himself throughout his career. And I think when on Reddit and stuff, you know, people would laugh at him. I think when he posted or when he said about retirement, there was a thread posted there, and people were kind of, you know, sad to see him go and thinking, oh no, he can still do it, you know. So he won everybody over in the end with his style and his kind of willingness to just fight whoever in, you know, whatever type of sport. And you know, fist fighting or bare knuckle fist fighting against boxing world champion Paulie Malignaggi and beating him and all. Like, you can't.
Paulie Malignaggi, who's that?
Whatever, Paulie Malignaggi.
Paulie Slips. Is that him?
Yeah. Anyway, whatever his name is, yeah, Paulie.
That lad.
Malignaggi. I don't know. Almost. However you say his name.
Paulie Malignaggi. There you go.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, obviously, that was you know, a big bout in his career, and it'll probably be like, you know, what he ends up being remembered for in combat sport more than anything.
Yeah, and that's class too, isn't it? Like sometimes even, you know, people are always giving up.
Like he's the perfect guy. Like, you know, yeah, in an actual fist fight, Artem would be like, you know,
yeah, he'd be the man.
One of the guys you wouldn't want to go for. And he kind of show that.
I'd say he'd be biting ears and all that. He'd hate you, Artem. But but it's nice. Like even like a DC when he won the heavyweight title, you couldn't help but smile just because he kind of got out of that shadow of John Jones for a bit. Even when he won the light heavyweight title, that shadow was always there, but it wasn't. And I think when Artem beat Paulie, there was like, oh shit, he got out of like the only there because he's Conor's fringe shadow. And I think he had done that for a lot of people, us included, before. But for a lot of people, he hadn't. But when he beat Paulie, I think a lot of people are like, and even if they didn't say it or didn't think it directly, I think maybe subconsciously even they're like, look, fucking fair play to him. And the MMA community loves nothing more than showing up the boxing community. So when Artem was like, he did that for everyone. He did that for all of us, So fair play to him. And I agree. I do think that's what, if you're to look through Artem Labov's record and his fight record, and if you get past the whole Conor McGregor fringe stuff, I think that's what he will be remembered for, and I think that's what people should remember him for, because that was fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So fair play to Artem. He's a great guy. Fair play to him. God bless. Right, let's look ahead as I talk to that. Let's look ahead to UFC 256 next week. Obviously, there's a big problem this week because Amanda Nunes versus Juliana Pena fell off of this card because Nunes tested positive for
265, not 56.
Yeah, I'm not great with numbers. But Amanda Nunes, Pena fell off because of COVID, and suddenly the card just doesn't look as good. One fight falling off. But it's still, it's still a good card. Don't get me wrong, at all here. On the undercard, you have some, good fighter like Johnny Munoz Jr. He's 10-1. You have Miles Johns, who we've seen coming through at this side of the world and fighting over in America even before he got to the UFC as well. Manscaped is a very good fighter. I think Kovalkiewicz versus Pena is not a bad fight at all. Ed Herman back again. Draco Rodriguez. Fiziev is very good. I think he's one of the best up-and-comers in the world. Him versus Bobby Green. It's a good test, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Bobby Green obviously isn't a world beater or anything, but he's a tough guy, and he's always game, and I think he's gonna get run over here. I think the game's moved on a bit. I think maybe the antics that he kind of throw at people would kind of put them off these days, but people are kind of well used to that now. Like, they're expecting it. It's not really. When you're getting punched in the face and talking trash, it's not really working. You have to be doing the impacting for it to really work. Yeah. And I think it's not going to work here because he's not going to be able to land a punch. He's not going to be able to get the positions. I think he's going to get pretty much ran over here.
Mm-hmm. I do as well. I think Fiziev is really, really good. And Song Yadong as well on this card against Casey Kenny, Angela Hill against Tisha Torres. Actually, we will talk more about Cage Warriors as well in upcoming. I haven't been able to see it yet. I only got home. But I think she was doing the commentary on Cage Warriors over in the US during the week, so we will definitely talk about that in an upcoming podcast as well. But her versus Tisha Torres is very, very good. Someone as well asked about Vicente Luque versus Michael Chiesa. We'll answer a few questions towards the end of the podcast as well, but that's a big fight in that division. Chiesa's right up there towards the top of that division. Vicente Luque has had some good wins recently, and when you look at that and you think about, okay, Colby is getting the next title shot, it looks like, and I think that's been 257 or 267 or something like that, maybe one of those. And MMA asks here about, does that fight make the winner the next title challenger, or does the welterweight congestion continue at the top? It's tough to know because Gilbert Burns beat Wonderboy, and I think that kind of took away one contender in Wonderboy, and Gilbert Burns will have to do a little bit more to get back there. But now the Masvidal thing is gone as well. If Chiesa wins this, I think he'll be right there or thereabouts. I think Luque might have to do a little bit more just because I think Chiesa's kind of has the in maybe a little bit with the UFC and things like that. And of course, you still have Leon Edwards there, which we can't forget. But maybe you could see Leon Edwards fighting the winner of this to get a title shot. And if there's a quick winner here, maybe could have a quick turnaround and get on one of the upcoming cards. But I think a big win here and a standout win could get one of them up towards a title shot. So that's a big fight. And also at 135 pounds, Pedro Munoz versus Jose Aldo Jr., one of the greatest fighters to ever step inside the UFC's octagon, even though the last few years haven't maybe been the best ever. But I think he'll have enough to beat Pedro Munoz, and I'm looking forward to seeing that one. But Derek Lewis versus Cyril Gane for the interim UFC heavyweight championship of the world, with Francis Ngannou taking 2 days off. They had to make an interim title for this one. But either way, it's all fairy tales. Who cares about that? It's the fight itself I care about.
Fight for Francis when he comes back, unifying the undisputed champion. So he probably doesn't care too much.
Yeah, and as well, they can keep John Jones out of the mix because of this. We have to make champion versus champion, so it's a win-win for the UFC, really. But look, I think Cyril Gane is going to win this fight easily, to be honest. Now, Derek Lewis has improved an awful lot over the years, and I give him great credit. And I think we've both given him great credit over the last while, because, I was very low on Derek Lewis as a fighter, to be honest. I thought he was effective and very good at what he did, but I didn't think he was a very good MMA fighter all round. But now I do. I think he is good. I think he's improved in all positions.
He was losing 90% of his time in the cage before winning. So what we'd seen, was using his big power to turn it around at the last second or in the moment, and winning the fight then. And me and you spoke about him kind of losing weight and stuff like that, and maybe it wouldn't be the best idea, but I think he doesn't seem to have the back problems that he used to. They were obviously must have been worse than we kind of gave credit for. Everybody would kind of roll their eyes or laugh when he'd kind of stand with his hands on his back or his hands on his knees and kind of complain when the fight wasn't going his way. But since that's been cleared up, he does look like he's had a new lease on life, and he looks a different fighter. And maybe he doesn't have the same type of power that he used to, but he still has enough power to put anybody in the division out if given the chance. So obviously Cyril Gane will have to be careful here, as he will any of the top guys in the heavyweight division can hit very hard and put you out very quickly. But I think he probably will outclass Lewis here and wear him down, either win a decision or get a late finish.
Mm-hmm. I think, I would tend to agree with everything you said there. I think Jairzinho Rosenstruck fight was a good preparation fight for the Derek Lewis, even though they're very different sort of fighters, but they are try to hit you with one big punch. I think Lewis will do it in different, more unorthodox and more dangerous ways in a lot of senses of that word. But I just think Gane will be too classy for him. Now, Lewis, we say it a lot, and maybe we're wrong again, but maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe going back a little bit to the very much looking for that one big shot might be the way to go here. He's been doing that with maybe a little bit more belief in his cardio recently, and where he can do other things as well. But I think maybe letting Cyril Gane run around and not necessarily tire himself out, because Cyril has great cardio and can keep going for 5 rounds. But if I'm Derek Lewis here, I'm probably not taking the fight because I don't want to get punched off Cyril Gane anyway. But if I'm as brave as Derek Lewis, I'm probably going in here and waiting him. Look, Derek Lewis and everyone else probably knows that if this goes to decision, Cyril Gane is winning it. So you might as well wait. You just wait that full 25 minutes to get your opportunity. And if it comes at 1 second, or it comes at 40 or 24 minutes and fucking 59 seconds, all well and good. A win is a win in either position. So I think it could be... I don't think this is going to be a barn burner at all, by any means. I think this is going to be very much a cat and mouse one, with Cyril Gane kicking from the outside, jabbing from the outside. And I think more than likely it will go 25 minutes, and more than likely Gane will win the decision. But it's I don't think it's going to be a great fight. I like it. I'll enjoy it, and it'll be one of those kind of Wonderboy versus Tyron Woodley sort of fights, in a heavyweight version of it, maybe with people not as technically good or not as classy, in Derek Lewis's case, comparing him to Woodley. But one of those where you're just waiting for one person to hit while the other one is winning the fight, so it's the old decision versus knockout, and who's going to win it. I think Cyril Gane will, but I'm really looking forward, and I think it should be a lot of fun. Right. before we go, we will take those couple of questions, but also there's a very, very good card next week. It is Clan Wars 41 above in Northern Ireland on the 8th of the 8th. If Tapology's thing has a right, myself and Ian talk a bit about this a good bit on the Chasing Pack coming up on Patreon this week. But Ali Mclean versus Henry Fedepe, a long time since Henry Fedepe has been around the Irish MMA scene, but Catherine Costigan on that card as well against Hayley Valentine. Ryan Curtis making his comeback against Tom Creasy, and a lot of other talent as well. Alexander O'Sullivan versus Tiernan Loughran. Very, very, very good fight there. Alexander O'Sullivan has nearly 30 amateur fights, so lots of good people on that card. Emil Pitak as well, who against Solomon Simon, according to Tapology. That's a fantastic fight. Two of them, probably two of Ireland's most, Pitak, I think he fought for Poland out in the IMAFs there for a while, didn't he? But two of the probably the most accomplished amateurs. Trevor McKingo as well against Jordan O'Neill. There's lots and lots of good amateur names and professional fights as well on this. So if you're around the Belfast area or travelling up to this, it's going to be a very good card. It's a good card, Graeme, isn't it? Some fun names there.
Yeah, it is. You know, Fedepe, he's never shied away. He's, what is he, like 4 years out of the sport, and he comes in against Ali Mclean. No easy fights. He's been everywhere. His 9-1 record might not look that outstanding, but he's one of those guys with a lot of talent. Maybe hasn't put in the work over the years, or hasn't dedicated himself to the sport, but is kind of dangerous everywhere. And on his day is a very entertaining fighter as well. Obviously, you mentioned Catherine Costigan coming in here and making fighting somebody making her debut. So we obviously don't know much about Hayley Valentine. Obviously, great to see Ryan Curtis back. He's had a lot of problems with injuries and things like that. Obviously, a lot of other things have stopped the kind of progress of the Irish MMA guys. Coronavirus, the Joe Carvalho death, all the trying to get regulated, all the extra expenses trying to put on shows here and all that kind of stuff. So it's great to have Clan Wars back and have a good card here with loads of Irish guys that people making their debut, established amateurs, couple of pros, a few pro fights on the main card. It's good to be back to somewhat normality from back when 5 years ago when this was the norm. This was on every week or two.
Yeah, and hopefully once the Republic gets back to normal as well, hopefully soon we will have Cage Legacy back, and maybe Cage Warriors and Bellator and the UFC and all as well. And some of these shows are as important as those shows. Like you don't get to the UFC or to Bellator or any of those without, Bellator maybe because they've signed people no, but you don't get to the UFC certainly without shows like this. So it's absolutely fantastic, and fair play to the people putting on this, and good luck to everyone on the card as well. Right, let's answer a few of these questions. We Honk on the Head says, where's the best sandwich joint in West Cork? I don't know if I've ever even been in West Cork. Graeme, any idea? Subway. Find us
West Cork, I don't know. I don't think I've been to West Cork. I've heard a lot about West Cork with the Sophie Tuscan de Plantier stuff, but I don't know. I don't think you have many options down there. I think you just it's probably the salmon shop that you have to go to.
Yeah. Do you know, I went to college with Ian Bailey. Do you know that?
Really? When he was doing law, was it?
Yeah, when he was doing law, yeah. And he was in with a friend of a friend.
Is he?
No, he was in the same law class as a friend of a friend, and he was always take the side of the person who has done the crime or whatever, and argue from that side. So I'm like, oh well, Ian, how are you? It was weird though, seeing him walking around all the time with his big trench coat, and everyone knew who he was. It's like, oh, there's Ian Bailey, look at him. I used to see him daily, when I was in Cork. So there you go. There's my terrible claim to fame there. Oh, you've seen a suspected murderer thousands of times.
Guilty. So, being a personal friend, can you give your opinion on guilty or not guilty?
I haven't watched Netflix or the Sky documentaries yet, so I will watch them, but I haven't watched them yet. I know very little about it.
The Netflix one is a lot of. Netflix one isn't great, but the Sky one is pretty good. Okay,
I'll watch that. So I'll get back to you, and I know. Jur MMA fan says, you left out Artem Lobov out of the durable fighters discussion last week. Went the distance with Ryan Hall, Cub Swanson, Andre Feely, Michael Johnson, to name a few. Johnson KO'd Poirier in one, and yet Artem ate the shots. Johnson is a number one contender. Or Artem is a number one contender. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, Artem definitely durable. You couldn't say Artem wasn't durable 100%, so that's very fair. Darren writing, should split decisions result in a split win bonus? Something like 70-30 in favour of the winner? No, I don't think so. Like, split decisions are if one judge makes a mistake and the other two get it right. Not normally, like sometimes fights are very close, but it's just a majority of who won. It's not, I don't know. It's a tough one. It is a tough one, but no, I don't think you can do that. Should you remove the current bonus system from Graeme Crawford and replace it with 20,000 flat bonus for TKO KO submission win? Should be more, but don't see the UFC doing that. Yeah, we've talked about that before recently enough on one of the podcasts. I would like to see that, I suppose, so everyone gets paid more, but like, the UFC do it for a reason. They do it.
I think you could probably convince Dana to go for it. Maybe not 20 grand, but maybe an extra 10 grand, for example, for a finish. Because Dana loves a finish. You could put on a masterclass dominant technique performance, technical performance, and Dana will be like, he didn't try to finish the fight. So you can maybe talk Dana into it, but I think the 50 grand bonus sounds better to like the media and to fans and stuff as well than you got 10 grand.
And I think the fighters would probably like not want it either. I think because now that's maybe says more about the fighters than anything else. But I think they like those. Well,
the low level, the entry level fighters would probably take the 10 grand, no problem. But
I don't know. I think they'd rather like try to get a big knockout or a fight at night and go for the 50. The 5 opportunities to get that 50 a couple of times.
It's true. It depends. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
But yeah, we'll see. Jake says, would you like to see Misha against Holly Holm, or should she go into the title picture already? Do you know what, with Misha Tate, I was thinking about this more. Be better off maybe giving her an easier sort of matchup and then giving her maybe a title shot. Now, it might be the best for Misha Tate, but for the UFC, there aren't that many title contenders there for Amanda Nunes. And say if she got one on, or a fight on a similar sort of date to Nunes versus Pena now, which looks like it's going to be the next pay-per-view card. So what? Well, that's only 4 weeks away, so maybe that's a bit close, but if she does get a fight and wins another one, I could see them pushing her in there. But her versus Holly Holm is a fight I'd also like to watch, but I think Holly would probably have too much for her nowadays. But, it's a rematch.
Well, I think it's kind of a win-win for the UFC if they do make the Tate versus Holly Holm match, because, Holly is very well known, obviously, for that head kick knockout, winning the title against Ronda Rousey. So people will remember that. People who dip in and out of MMA will know who Holly Holm is, and if she goes in there against Amanda Nunes again, like I don't think anybody's going to be complaining, and the UFC will be happy enough with that. And obviously, if Misha Tate goes in and beats Holly Holm, you can really sell that as well. So I think if you make that matchup, either whoever wins is a exciting, sellable matchup for Nunes.
Yeah, and last one here from Ashley Schaefer. If you want to buy a BMW, go to him. Where does AJ McKee rank pound for pound? I think he must be up there. If you think about it, like a lot of people, John Jones hasn't fought in fucking 5 years. Habib is gone. And there aren't that many like dominant champions in the UFC at the moment either. Pitbull was the one in Bellator. You'd have to put him right up there. And I'm just pulling up the UFC pound for pound rankings now, and top of it is John Jones. But how's he in there? Usman definitely number one. Like Adesanya.
Another one, Volkanovski's an extremely underrated fighter. If you put him in there against AJ McKee, that'd be a really interesting fight. I think Volkanovski would win it.
Do you? That's interesting. Now, some people want Holloway versus him, and I think that's because Holloway's American and stuff, and you always have that. But yeah, I would nearly rather see Volkanovski versus McKee. I'd rather see both. I'd love to see both of them. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, I think Adesanya. I think McKee is a better all-round fighter than Adesanya. Adesanya is way, way, way too high on that list as well. By the way, that's ridiculous how high he is. But yeah, I will put McKee up there. Poirier, Blachowicz, Miocic, Holloway are all there in that pound for pound list in the UFCs. I think he belongs with them, to be honest. I think he's that good. But yeah, let's
there's like a few more big wins. Yeah, like obviously that's a huge win that he had at the weekend, but you'd like a few more of them before you kind of start picking him over Volkanovski. But like I'd love to see the fight, and it would be it could go either way. I'd love to, I don't know how it would look. With AJ McKee, I'm very interested to see, even though he's the champion now, I still feel like his journey is kind of still going, and he still hasn't reached his peak. So I'm like, exciting times ahead.
Yeah, indeed, 100%. All right, everyone, thanks very much for listening. I appreciate it. If you haven't signed up on Patreon yet, it's the start of the month. Now is definitely the time. Patreon.com/Severe MMA Podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Sean Sheehan BA. Follow Graeme at Severe MMA. Follow at Severe MMA Pod as well, where you can get all your questions and everything during the week. As well, subscribe on YouTube. We put this podcast up on YouTube now. It's painstaking, annoying work for me. So hit the subscribe button there. Hit the subscribe button on SoundCloud. We're almost at 1 million people who have listened to Severe MMA Podcast. So we're very, very close to that. And it's absolutely fantastic. We really appreciate it. Or wherever you are, iTunes, Spotify. We're up on all of those places. Hit that subscribe button. And leave a rating and review of all that. We don't ask very often, so if you do it, it'd be absolutely fantastic. And if you're signed up for Patreon, don't bother with any of that, because we love you way more already, so fair play to you. Right, everyone, thanks very much for listening. All that's left to do is the inspirational quote of the week. Nothing can dim the light which shines from within. We'll see you next Tuesday, or probably Sunday.